All right. Let me just close the doors here. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody had a great lunch and all relaxed. The weather's lovely outside. Great to introduce Deep Lidder here, and he's going to be talking about building a dream team and delivering your data strategy with a people-centered data governance. So Deep, great to have you here. He's come all the way from England, a fellow Brit here. England's doing well at cricket.
I've inject. Are England doing well?
They are doing.
Oh, right, brilliant.
300 and something for 2.
Oh, wow.
Anybody who follows cricket. So.
Gosh.
Okay, sorry about that. But I'll hand over to Ben to take you through his story.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Baz. And thank you all for joining. I realise it's a lovely sunny afternoon, so appreciate you taking the time to spend it with me. So yeah, as Baz mentioned, I'll be talking about people-centered data governance and why I think that for data governance efforts to be successful, they must be people-centered. And I'll talk about what I mean by that as well. And I'll leave some time at the end for questions that you may have. But I'd like to start by talking about my first job. So when I was 16, I started a job flipping burgers at McDonald's. And I remember I was very excited to start the job. Part of it was I was going to be able to start saving up money for driving lessons, but it also included a free lunch, which counted for a lot when I was 16. What's not to love? But I remember on my first working day, rather than being let loose on the grills, I was handed a thick set of food safety protocols and guidelines. And they covered all sorts of things at McDonald's. They included ensuring that you were chopping the food in the right areas, that food was being stored appropriately, making sure that you washed your hands regularly, very important to make that clear for teenagers. But I was reminded of this very recently when I was delivering data governance training for one of my clients. That actually McDonald's offers a lot of lessons in the business value of data governance. Because a lot of the challenge and pushback that I receive when I'm delivering training for data governance is that people don't understand what the point of it is. They don't understand why they should be engaged with it or why they should do it. They think that we're coming in to add additional controls, we're bringing in friction to their business processes, and that actually we're just stopping the business from having fun, conducting their analysis, and ruining the party. Now I realise that you're not here to hear me talk about burgers, but I do find the example of McDonald's helps answer the question, what is the point of putting controls and guardrails, and appropriate controls and guardrails in place? Because McDonald's takes these controls very seriously. They infuse all of the processes at the organisation and in the restaurant. And the controls, they allow McDonald's to comply with regulations, they drive operational efficiencies, they maintain reputation of the brand, and they enable the organisation to scale globally. And most importantly, they drive trust. They enable the team to trust the ingredients that they're delivering for their customers. And they enable customers to trust the quality and the output, the burgers that they're consuming. So I'd argue that there's a very strong parallel to establishing controls for your data in order to deliver for your business, and that appropriate controls don't restrict your business, but rather enable it. And if your team wants to ensure the quality of your own ingredients and to do that at scale, then you must establish appropriate controls and you must establish data governance. So that's one of the parallels that I've noticed. But to introduce myself, my name's Deep Lidder. As Baz mentioned, I'm based in London and I'm the data governance delivery lead at Cervelo, a global data and digital consultancy. And as a consultant, I get called into all sorts of organizations to fix data governance. So usually the organizations I've worked with have tried a few iterations of establishing data governance, and often they've lost engagement, they failed to engage people, and they haven't delivered business value. So I've usually been brought in to fix and at least drive improvements in data governance so that the organization can realize appropriate value. So over the next 20-25 minutes, I'd like to share my view of data governance and why I believe to be successful and to deliver to your data strategy, it must be people-centered. So what do I mean by data governance? I think there are as many definitions of data governance as there seem to be perspectives and books on it. I think I've read so many different definitions, but I like to just think about it in terms of people, process, and technology. So I define it as a framework of responsibilities, processes, and technologies that enable your data to be managed and treated and trusted. So managed as an asset and trusted. And what do I mean by it being people-centered? Well, that's an approach that ensures that the framework delivers value for your people. Taking that, it recognizes the critical role of individuals to the success of initiatives, but I don't limit it only to the participants. So in terms of it being people-centered, both participants in your organization, your data governance team, your employees, your users, owners, stewards, but also those that benefit from, so the people who benefit from the data governance efforts. So other users in the organization, but also your customers, customers of your products, your users of the services that you're providing. So ensuring that the results of the efforts in your organization are benefiting people, so both internally and externally. And to be honest, it might sound like an obvious point. So it may sound like I'm laboring the point of data governance being centered on people. But actually, what I found is that the reason that many of the organizations I've worked with have failed is because there's been a lot of noise around data governance efforts, and perhaps there's been more focus on processes, defining policies, establishing tools, investing tools, rather than thinking about the point of putting these things in place to deliver some value for your people. So I found that there's often a lot of noise, which is why efforts can fail to realize value. But I do believe that organizations that don't actually have data governance structures in place that actually deliver value for people will just be outcompeted by those that do. Because in my view, what data governance does, it's aligning the two most strategic assets of your organization. So it's aligning your people and your data. And I really believe in the power of people, so in the power of people to collaborate and create, innovate. And I believe in the power of data in order to drive better decisions, but also to scale our impact. And I think when we can align those two things together, it's very powerful. And so for me, the work we do as data governance practitioners is critically important. So if we believe in the mission of our organization and the reason why it exists, then I think as data governance practitioners, we have a duty to advocate for data governance, and it's important in delivering value. And hopefully we do believe in the mission of the organizations we work for. And as I put this session together, I thought back over my experience and the organizations I've worked with, and I've identified these kind of three common themes of where data governance implementation has been successful and delivered value and done a strong job of aligning people and data. Excuse me. So the first theme is tell your story. The second theme is deliver a gift. And the third theme is embrace the journey. And these broadly align to a why, what, how. So tell your story. Why is it that we're bothering to do data governance? Delivering a gift. What is it that this actually delivers for your business? What value is it driving? And embrace the journey aligns to how do we go about establishing and maturing data governance at our organization. So let's start with the first theme, tell your story. Oh, I've spoken about that, but yeah, tell your story. So before I did this, before I was working in data governance, I was previously a high school physics teacher, and I worked at a pretty rough school in the middle of London, and it was a tough gig. I remember my first day, I was basically sworn at, cursed. Nobody wanted to be there, and I think part of it was that physics had previously been taught in a pretty theoretical, framework-heavy way. But what I learned from that experience, a lot of my teaching was done through stories. And it taught me that even the most difficult audiences can be engaged through the power of a great story. And in my view, data governance lives and dies in the business. And everybody in your organization has a role to play. And the title of this talk was Building a Dream Team. And in my view, you should be looking to engage everyone in the organization to engage with data governance. And the easiest and quickest way of doing that, most effective way, is by developing a clear and engaging narrative. And I think the best, most successful data governance narratives align closely to the organization's mission, tied to the broader business strategy, and have tangible goals. And in order to get buy-in, it's important that the messaging comes from the top. And I think what I've found is that some of the data teams I've worked in have had difficulty engaging other business leads and other functions across the business. And I see there's kind of a few reasons for that, and I think some of that can be kind of bridged through having a clear narrative that outlines why anybody should be engaging with these efforts. I think part of the friction is, part of it is a lack of awareness. So there may be a limited understanding of what data governance is trying to do, how it connects to decision making, and that can result in a disconnect. And I think part of our responsibility is to bridge that gap through kind of education and communication efforts. I think another difficulty is a focus on immediate priorities. More urgent or issues that are viewed as more urgent may receive more attention, because data governance takes time. It's a change management program. These things don't happen overnight, and so support can easily be pulled if it isn't clear on what value it's driving. I think another one that I found interesting is that there can be a resistance to change. I was working for an oil company for a few years, and I mean, they had no I mean, the company was highly profitable, and they didn't want to do it. No one wanted to be blamed for changing anything or doing anything differently. They didn't want to get the blame for a dip in profits. And so coming in and suggesting that some behaviours may align closer to the overall strategy didn't work so well at an operational level. People didn't want to engage. So I'd like to share some stories that I've worked on with clients that have been effective in driving engagement with data governance and data management efforts. So a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, I worked with a European retail bank, and they had actually just received quite a significant fine from the regulator due to a customer data breach. And so the strategy there was all around rebuilding customer trust. And so in all of our data governance communication, we emphasized the connection between the work that we were doing and driving trust. So we can, by doing this, we can trust the employees in our organization that they have access to data that they should have. We can trust that they're only able to do what they should be doing. They can trust the data that they're seeing, and our customers can trust that we're doing the right thing with their data. So we have this message that's directly to what's in our annual report, what's in our strategy. It goes straight to the top, and it's much easier for our senior leadership to buy in and support our efforts because it's clear what we're trying to do. Last year, I worked with a slightly different company, an R&D specialty chemicals company, and their strategy was around innovating new products. It's a highly competitive market, but it's all around innovation. And so we framed our data governance efforts as enabling innovation. How do we do that? Well, we're making sure that teams are able to find data assets that they may otherwise not be able to. We're able to inventory and catalog data across the firm. We're also able to make trusted data available to R&D groups or for predictive modeling or for the advanced analytics team. And these will enable you to innovate new products. And this ties directly back to what we're trying to do in our organization. So part of the messaging we had there, I really like this, was that data governance is a catalyst for your innovation engine. So that appealed very much to the chemists in the organization, that we were enabling innovation to happen quicker. And it was clear, or at least a link was drawn between the point of these efforts and what they would deliver. And I'll give one more example, which is about the oil company, because there was a resistance, a strong resistance to change or to do anything differently, even if it was the case that it was developing foundations that would be more beneficial in the long term. But a key message that organization stressed was around safety. In fact, even in their office spaces, when you would visit the office, they had the same safety protocols as you would have on an oil rig. So you would have to make sure you were holding banisters as you were going up and down stairs, and if you weren't, you'd be called out, and you weren't allowed to walk around while looking at your phone. And so there we tied our data governance effort to safety. So we can actually trust the data to make sure that we're abiding by what we should be doing. So when we store chemicals, we know that we have the right amount in there that we're expecting, that it's not a hazardous amount, that the unit of measure is appropriate, which may sound simplistic, but actually there was another chemicals company we weren't working directly with, but they'd actually stored the wrong units of measure, which had led to a warehouse fire, because they hadn't realized what value they actually had of the hazardous chemical that they were storing. So there were a few examples of the types of narratives that we developed that have been successful in getting more buy-in, and also getting buy-in at an executive level, which then provided the support of more engagement and adoption across the enterprise. Let's go sip of water. So I was chatting with a CDO of a UK insurer not so long ago, and we were trying to put in place a new data governance function. Unfortunately, they'd tried 2 previous times and they'd failed to realise adoption or any value from their investment. And so what he said to me was, the problem is, he was from East London, the problem is you're an office of no. You're all saying no. You come in and say no. You tell my people they can't do things. And he was getting quite animated. It was like, he just didn't see us as enabling the business. And he said his own team would never buy into it. And I thought about that because I was reflecting on that at home, and I'd realised that actually I had started saying no a lot more often than I used to, and that I had also become a member of another group that could be thought of as an office of no. So last year, I became a parent, and I find myself, I have a 1-year-old, and I keep saying no to him. And what I found now is the reason I'm saying no is that he's starting to walk, and at home, his exploration is posing a risk of his harm. In our kitchen, for example, he's able to open doors, or he's able to access knives, he's able to get to bottles or bottles of bleach or open cables. And so I find myself saying no to him. And I was thinking, well, how can I deal with, how can I put controls that he's our first, so we didn't have any controls in place in the home first, but how can I deal with this risk that our son is now experiencing in this environment? And I sat with my wife and said, well, we have kind of 2 options. One option is that we could basically, each time he starts to kind of walk and crawl around, we can put him in a playpen, or we can put him in his cot. And then he's restricted. He's kept in a safe environment, that it's soft, he has his toys in there, and then we make sure that we're mitigating the risk of his harm by having him in this restrictive environment. I guess another option would be for us to put controls in place around the house. So to make sure that we put appropriate locks on the doors, that we put soft matting down, that we hide cables away, that knives are placed places that are out of reach. But I'd be interested, actually, if we can have a show of hands of which option that you may consider if you're in the situation of needing to control your home environment for a child. So if you could raise your hands, who might consider the first option of putting their child in a restrictive playpen? That's a loaded question. 1. Okay. Are you both? Yeah, I guess it's a balance, right? Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And option 2, perhaps putting more controls in place. Yeah, that's absolutely. And I think it's fair what you're saying, that actually you probably want a mix of both. But we also have now starting to baby-proof our home and installing locks, putting harmful objects out the way and hiding cables. But I was thinking about this because I hope you'd agree that actually when we put these controls in place, it would be ridiculous for us to put them in place without thinking about the point of them. The point of them is to protect our son. They're for him. They're not to protect the cupboard or the knives. The rules and controls we put in place are also not to limit him. Rather, they give him freedom. By putting the controls in place, he's now free to explore the environment, and they're rooted in care and in protection and in love. But what does this have to do with data governance? Well, I think what I've found is that many of the departments I've worked with and come into have behaved the first way. They deal with the risk of inappropriate data usage and access by restricting people to the equivalent of a small playpen. And they make it really difficult for people to do anything. They introduce lots of red tape, bureaucratic red tape, they hurdles of approvals, and they become effectively an office of no. But that traditional approach, I'd argue, is just not adequate for the fast-paced big data era of big data, because our organizations have to rapidly adapt and meet customer needs. And I think to ensure faster and safer analytics and decision-making, we require appropriate rules, controls, and constraints. So effectively kind of a seatbelt for speed that enable our people to respond quickly. I think we need more appropriate, more safety features, not fewer. And that ensures that our employees and users aren't exposed to an unreasonable amount of harm, and nor is our organization. So we have the appropriate controls in place that manage this risk appropriately, and also allow the space for exploration, innovation, and creativity. So that's step 1. I'm mindful of the time. I will pick up the pace. I haven't spoken about our second theme, deliver a gift. So I see this as demonstrating what is it that data governance can do. And I think the key here is kind of thinking big, starting small, and delivering results quickly. And I recommend what we've found worked well is delivering a gift that people want. Right? I guess it's the same as at birthday or Christmas. You'd rather have a gift that you want. And often I think that some data governance teams have tried to deliver gifts that nobody really needed and put a lot of effort in to doing that. But if we can address a specific pain point or business need, then we can go a long way to getting engagement. I'll give some examples. I think one common complaint we've had is that business stakeholders just can't find the data that they need. Maybe it's siloed, it's on Excel on someone's system, maybe that person's gone. But if we can look to put together some sort of inventory or data catalog that provides a central inventory of assets, and it doesn't have to be an investment in a tool. This could start as a simple list in Excel just to demonstrate the value, and that's quite a quick and easy way of starting to show value of these types of efforts. Another frequent pain point is that some people just don't know where they need to go, who they need to ask in order to get context around data or to understand what it means or if it can be trusted. So we can look to make visible appropriate data owners and stewards. There are probably people who have this context, but it may not be visible. And also I think that's one of the benefits of data governance, that it makes a lot of these efforts that are probably already taking place visible to the rest of the business. And then it can also actually be recognized and rewarded. Another complaint we get is that people don't know what data they can trust. And so we could look to introduce some initial kind of profiling efforts. That doesn't need to be, again, expensive or anything. That could be, I mean, for a bank, we just were running some simple SQL queries just to provide some view of what the data looked like and whether it could be trusted. And I think, as I mentioned, if we're looking to deliver a tangible gift, no matter how small, we can start to demonstrate value and build up momentum and support for a data governance program. And I think data governance sometimes doesn't celebrate these successes vocally enough. So I think once we're delivering value, making sure that we're communicating the value that we're delivering, and also sharing credit with the business so that we can celebrate together and also continue to get buy-in and support. Another example of a gift we delivered kind of a data health, data trust dashboard. This was a relatively quick project. This was eight weeks turnaround, just a dashboard in Power BI, but and it demonstrated the art of the power of what was possible. So we had pages that included things like performance, how well a data pipeline's performing, pages on understanding of the data assets we have, how much of it is defined, how much of it is catalogued, around how much of it do we have context, what is the number of data errors that we have. So it wasn't restricted just to data quality metrics or traditional or typical data quality metrics, but broader around other aspects of what would we need in order to trust our data. And that went down very well with senior leadership, because then they had a tangible way of understanding where are we now, and we could also demonstrate the value of the efforts we were putting in as these metrics. We can track improvement in efforts. So let's do a time check. So I was just under 10 minutes. So that's step 2, delivering a gift. And this third theme is around embracing the journey. So I see this as how can we look to establish, develop, and mature data governance. So I think the key message here is that it is an evolution, it is a journey. It's not a kind of one and done project. And as I mentioned, kind of looking to start small, think big, think longer term, and scaling quickly, and prioritizing ruthlessly on steps that are aligned to business priorities and the business strategy. And tailoring approach to our organization's culture and people. I think one other thing here is actually communicating realistic expectations. I think part of the reason that some of the data governance efforts had failed previously is because management at the business had unreasonable expectations of what they were going to get from it and when they were going to get particular, or what they saw as value. So I think part of that is an education effort that these things do take time, and that we must have realistic expectations of what data governance can deliver. It's not going to be the case that all of a sudden we're driving towards 100% data quality and we're going to get that in 3 months, although some people might imagine that's possible. Often what happens is that people think once the data governance program starts, the data governance is responsible for cleaning up every single data quality issue and should be turning around data quality that can be trusted, and it's only the responsibility of a team of 2 or 3 to turn that around in kind of 3 months. So I think communicating, education, ensuring that expectations are appropriate. And changing behaviors takes time. And that's less about the complexity of data governance and more around the complexity of people. People are difficult, and these things, education and changing behaviors, these things aren't the kind of things that could be done in a short project. I'll share an example of a journey we've been on with a global commodities company, so they're multinational with business units in different countries, and what we worked on there was developing a roadmap that it would establish this kind of people-centered approach to data governance. So the first thing we did was to identify data stakeholders, but then establish the appropriate forums in which data decisions could be made visibly and openly and transparently, and so that everyone could see what was going on in the direction in which we were moving. So we looked to put together appropriate forums, and then we asked questions to understand what are the pain points, what are the issues, what are the concerns, dreams, and hopes of data stakeholders in the organization, and what can we develop a view of where data governance can perhaps assist and bridge those areas. For this particular client, we worked to develop a kind of federated data governance operating model. So we had a central data governance function that worked at an enterprise level. They set the policies and standards, they drove the program, provided support and oversight, and because it was a multinational, we had local BUs that managed their local data activities, running data governance day-to-day, defining and managing data. And in this model, we looked to put together kind of a two-tier levels of forum, so operational data level forum and a senior strategic executive forum. And so the data domain forum, they would monitor progress and issues across domains, address roadblocks, and then the senior leaders would align on more critical decisions that were needed on initiatives, people, funding, and resolving any unresolved issues that came from the operational layer. And then in terms of next steps, once we've engaged the people, allowed their buy-in, had some kind of education efforts, looking to formalize and define appropriate standards, enabling us to scale, and also deploying technology to automate and scale data governance across the organization. So starting with people rather than starting with a tool or with a policy, and then looking to build on that. So yeah, successful data governance and evolution rather than a revolution, as I mentioned, and that's a change transformation program. So I think I've got just less than... Oh, yeah. So that was our kind of high-level overview of what I mean by people-centered data governance and the 3 steps to consider when delivering a data governance program that aligns to your data strategy. So tell your story, deliver a gift, embrace your journey. Before I wrap up, I'll just say a quick word about Cervelo. So as I mentioned, we're a data and digital consultancy. We're across the US, UK, Australia, and India, and we work with clients to solve the most challenging data and digital problems. And as I mentioned, I'm the data governance delivery lead here. So if you'd like to find out more, I'll be around. Please do come over and say hi. And my LinkedIn's on screen. So yep, please connect. And happy to share these slides or any other further material as well. And happy to discuss ideas and approaches. Always open to that. But yeah, thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Okay, thanks, Deep. Any questions for Deep? Any questions from the audience? Oh, question here.
The title of the presentation is called Build Your Dream
That's
Team.
right.
So obviously there's the people on your team.
That's right.
That are driving it. But when you talk about roles in the business or in the divisions, are there particular roles that you'd say we need a person who can do this or believes in this or supports this? Like, can you define that? I guess who the dream team is?
So I mean, the way I see the dream team is, I think everybody should be part of the data governance dream team. But I realise that's unrealistic. Now, you're not going to get that straight away, right? It's going to expand. It's a journey. But eventually, we should have everyone in our organisation is bought into this because everybody has a responsibility to play. Everyone who's touching data. But I think it's going to initially start with the key data stakeholders, those that this is impacting, those that are using this most often. And I think, traditionally, we've kind of identified data owners and data stewards. We're looking to identify who is it that people are naturally going to ask questions around this data. Because sometimes it's the case that I think people are picking up data responsibilities that aren't part of their formal job description, but it's just not visible or we may not be made aware. So it'd be interesting to understand who are the people on which these data responsibilities may be falling informally, and then making that perhaps more formal and visible. And then expanding from there. I think eventually, I realize it's slightly idealistic, eventually you'd want everyone to be part of your dream team, but I think it starts with those that are doing these kind of data governance roles at the moment, and perhaps they're doing that informally, making that formal.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, there's one online question.
Oh, yep.
A couple of onlines, but
Sure.
I'll pick one out. And it says, and I'll just summarize it, which is, what is the most effective strategy for overcoming challenges for data governance? So out of all the experience and stories you had, kind of a couple of the most effective you found?
For overcoming challenges, as in...
data governance challenges.
Yeah. I mean, the most effective way is listening, which sounds simple but doesn't happen as often as making sure that people are heard out and really understanding what it is that what they have resistance to, because they may not always verbalize that. It may be something else that, and I think that's something that's slightly more difficult now because more of these sessions are had online rather than in person, that perhaps people can stay silent when we're looking to roll out these. We can have all of these sessions, but perhaps people just stay off camera and on mute rather than voice their dissent. But at least making sure that there are forums that enable people to feel heard. And I think there are ways of approaching that. One thing we did with one of our clients was making sure that we were actually sourcing input and feedback prior to these in-person sessions and having that on an anonymous board so that at least we had something to talk to and people had a forum in which they could put forward their concerns.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deep, and
Thank you.
all your
Thanks, everybody.
thoughts here. Thank you very much.